So this creation came out only a few days ago, and there have been a lot of back and forth and discourse within the Starfield modding community. I've been intrigued with it for a little while now, so I wanted to hop on the wagon, play around with this creation, and provide y'all with a large breakdown of the creation, as well as my thoughts overall. My name is Geronimo, and today we are taking a look at possibly the most ambitious Starfield creation ever made. Thank you for watching and enjoy the video. The creation we are taking a look at today is StarSim, Beyond Space by Quarter Onion Games for 1,000 credits, available for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. This is an ambitious Starfield creation designed to fundamentally change how you experience space travel. StarSim fights to build a persistent, interconnected space simulation layer around the settled systems. Its biggest addition is a physical jump gate network connecting nearly 300 handcrafted orbits, allowing you to fly from one system to another through space rather than simply selecting a destination from the galaxy map. The result is intended to make space itself the primary highway of Starfield, giving exploration a much greater sense of scale and continuity. Now, I'm going to go ahead and break up the components of the creation below so it's a little easier to digest. First off, we have the gate network. The most immediately noticeable feature is StarSim's physical gate system. Jump gates are positioned around the edge of star system orbits, generally corresponding to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, and connect the game's space locations into a larger network. Instead of opening a menu and instantly loading into another orbit, you can physically fly to a gate and travel through it to the next connected area. Now, the network isn't simply a connection of random destinations. StarSim uses pathfinding to establish connections between the different orbits, creating a navigable network across the settled systems. The developers have attempted to make the network broadly correspond to the locations of systems on a galaxy map, although it isn't intended to be a perfect one-to-one representation. A dedicated mapping system also helps you understand the connections as you explore them located within navigation consoles on your ship. This fundamentally changes the rhythm of traveling through Starfield. You can choose to physically cruise through space and follow established gate routes, the idea being that space becomes something you travel through rather than something you skip over. With that, I'm going to go ahead and highlight each individual component of StarSim, or what it's intended to provide the player, before I get into my overall opinions. StarSim dramatically increases the scale of individual orbit spaces. The creation supports orbits with areas reaching 20 kilometers or more, creating substantially more room for ships, stations, anomalies, and other points of interest to exist independently of the player's immediate position. The result is a much greater sense of distance. A station isn't necessarily sitting a few seconds away from you. It can exist somewhere within a large three-dimensional environment that you actually have to navigate. With that, the core of the creation is a living ship simulation. StarSim introduces a persistent simulation in which ships aren't simply spawned around the player for random encounters. Ships are assigned jobs, commands, and tasks, allowing them to perform activities independently of the player. Freighters transport cargo, miners gather resources, security vessels patrol and scan for contraband, military ships patrol their territories, and pirates can attack civilian traffic. This means the ships you see actually have a purpose. A freighter passing through a system isn't necessarily just scenery. It may be transporting valuable cargo from one location to another. A pirate attack can be an actual interruption to that trade route. Military patrols can encounter hostile ships. Security vessels can conduct inspections. The simulation continues even when you're not directly involved in every event. That creates the foundation for emergent gameplay. You may be traveling toward a mission destination and stumble across a freighter under attack, a stranded vessel, a pirate raid, or another event that wasn't specifically scripted for you. With that, StarSim also lays the groundwork for a much deeper economy than Starfield normally provided. Corporations and factions are simulated entities that manage ships and stations, while production, transportation, consumption, and other economic activities occur throughout the simulation. Freighters physically move goods through the gate network, meaning cargo isn't merely an abstract number. It can exist aboard ships that are actually traveling between locations. This is particularly interesting because it gives piracy and smuggling more meaning. If a freighter has just picked up valuable cargo, that cargo can actually be aboard the vessel. Intercepting the ship before becomes more than simply defeating a randomly spawned enemy and taking generic loot. With that, freight transportation is also another important part of the simulation. Different factions and corporations have ships performing logistical jobs throughout the settled systems. These vessels can transport cargo through the gate network, potentially exposing valuable shipments to pirates and other threats. This gives a player the opportunity to become involved in the logistics system rather than just simply observing it. For example, you could encounter a freighter carrying valuable goods and decide to ignore it, protect it from pirates, or attack it yourself. That makes the decision to engage with another ship more meaningful because you're potentially interacting with an actual piece of the simulated economy. And piracy becomes considerably more interesting because StarSim gives ships actual cargo and jobs. Pirates can raid trade routes, while security ships actively patrol and perform contraband-related duties. The creation also makes greater use of some of Starfield's underutilized vanilla systems, including ship dialogue, scanning, and ship stealth, giving these mechanics a much greater purpose. This opens the door to a more convincing smuggler playstyle. Instead of simply jumping into a random encounter, you're operating with a simulated network where commercial traffic, security, military forces, and criminals have overlapped interests. Along with that, security vessels have dedicated roles within the simulation, including scanning ships for contraband. This gives the otherwise underutilized contraband system a more natural place within everyday space travel. The combination of these things means that traveling through a busy system can become a much more dynamic experience. You're not simply waiting for a random encounter to spawn, you may encounter ships that are already performing their own activities. And like I've already stated, StarSim also introduces a more persistent military presence. Faction ships patrol their territories, while hostile forces can conduct raids and attacks on settled systems. The gate network creates natural choke points that military forces can use to move between areas, while also giving invading forces routes through which they can attack. This has the potential to create battles that feel like events happening within the universe rather than encounters specifically generated for and from the player. You can participate, help one side, ignore the conflict, or potentially exploit the chaos for your own benefit. Another important simulation feature is the faction ships aren't necessarily treated as disposable objects. StarSim includes systems for shipbuilding and replacement when faction ships are destroyed. That helps maintain the long-term simulation. If ships were permanently removed, whenever destroyed, faction fleets could gradually disappear from the universe. Instead, StarSim can replace lost ships, allowing the simulated organizations to continue functioning. This is part of what makes the creation different from a traditional quest mod. It's trying to create a system that continues operating whether or not the player is watching. And the creation also adds additional space content, including new stations, faction bases, M-class ships, trade routes, and other space points of interest. However, the developers don't necessarily approach these like traditional Starfield planetary POIs. Instead, much of the content is built around the orbit itself. Each orbit has a handcrafted environmental identity. You can encounter things such as comets, asteroids, planetoids, magnetic anomalies, gravitational anomalies, and other natural formations. Some locations also contain atmospheric environmental storytelling positioned around the periphery of the main space environment. Exploration is additionally rewarded through XP for discovering new orbits and scanning certain anomalies that can be added to your database. And with that, the creation also introduces additional asteroid and resource activity, helping make otherwise empty stretches of space more interesting. These environmental features contribute to the idea that space isn't simply a backdrop for ship combat. It contains natural phenomena and resources that can become part of the exploration experience. This is especially important when combined with much larger orbits. Instead of every area being built around the obvious quest destination, StarSim gives you reasons to look around and investigate what's actually occupying the surrounding space. And the simulation goes beyond simple cargo transportation by incorporating passenger, mail, and parcel traffic. These systems help flesh out the idea that people and goods are constantly moving between settlements and systems. Beyond Space's current emphasis is on building the underlying simulation rather than giving the player a complete transportation career. These systems provide the infrastructure for future gameplay involving freight, passengers, and commercial activity. And there's also ship, weapons, and combat reworks. They made broader changes to ships, stations, weapons, and combat balance, the goal being to make ship encounters function better within a world containing substantially more traffic and larger scale battles. This is worth emphasizing because StarSim isn't simply adding a bunch of ships to vanilla Starfield. The underlying balance and behavior need to account for a simulation where ships can encounter one another without the player being present. And underneath all of this is extensive technical framework. The creation uses systems for object spawning, object pooling, AI packages, jobs, commands, tasks, pathfinding, asynchronous messaging, and simulated versus loading AI behavior. These systems allow a large number of ships and other objects to participate in the simulation without requiring every object to be fully loaded and actively running in the game world at all times. The developers specifically describe the use of a pool system to reuse objects, native collections for handling larger number of elements, and AI systems capable of transitioning between simulated and fully loaded states. The goal is to make the enormous simulation possible while limiting the performance impact on Starfield's underlying script system. And all that being said, StarSim isn't intended to replace Starfield's entire gameplay loop. Instead, it provides a new layer underneath it. The existing vanilla quests, factions, ships, weapons, and all other content still exists, but the space surrounding them becomes much more dynamic and is just further integrated into the game. So what exactly is StarSim and what isn't it? In my opinion, the easiest way to understand it is to think of it as a simulation framework that is intended to turn Starfield's space into a functioning ecosystem within the game. It creates the circumstances in which things can happen without you. Freighters move cargo, pirates hunt freighters, security scans ships, military patrols move between systems, stations produce goods, ships travel through gates, battles erupt, cargo can change hands, and you can choose whether to participate or watch. That distinction is important because the creation's biggest strength isn't necessarily a single feature you can immediately interact with. It's the combination of systems working together. Overall, StarSim Beyond Space is arguably one of the most ambitious attempts to fundamentally change Starfield's space-based gameplay. Its physical gate network, enormous handcrafted orbits, persistent faction simulation, independent ship AI, freight logistics, piracy, security scanning, military patrols, raids, anomalies, stations, and economic simulation make the settled systems feel substantially more interconnected. Its biggest limitation is also its biggest distinction. Much of the simulation happens around you rather than directly through you via traditional quests or menus. So hopefully that breakdown was a little bit helpful for those of you a little bit confused on what exactly it does. Honestly, even with that, it is still kind of a vague mod. My opinion on the matter is that this creation is really meant to reinvent the wheel for Starfield, make it a completely different way to play and explore the settled systems, focus primarily on what it's titled, the simulation. And truthfully for me, I don't really think I'll play around with this creation too much longer, as I'm really not into these simulation style games with things that you see in the universe but you don't necessarily interact with on a gameplay level basis. That being said, I am going to keep it downloaded because I do think eventually when I'm tired of the basic Bethesda Starfield level gameplay, it is something I could do to really expand my universe, as I can understand the immediate appeal of it. That being said, I really think it could use a little more love in the ease of use department. Now, I'm not completely sure if it's unique to me, but when I first booted up the creation, I wish I'd spawned a little closer to Jemison after my first Unity jump, as one, that's when I started to notice more NPCs and unique encounters, and two, I think getting forced to jump between gates for the first half hour to full hour of your gameplay can turn a lot of people away from the creation. I also wish there was some sort of labeling convention for the cardinal directions of the gates, as otherwise, as far as I'm aware, it's all really just trial and error to get yourself oriented in the right direction and point your ship where you want to go if you're trying to quest through Starfield via the vanilla quests while using this mod. Now that's just some baseline level feedback. I do have a lot more to experience within the mod, and overall I do actually think it's worth its price tag because it really does redefine the video game as a whole. And if you're into exploration and simulation style games, I do think it's worth checking out. I just recommend close to a vanilla install and have some patience at the very beginning of your playthrough. Let me know your thoughts of this creation in the comment section below, like and subscribe for more Starfield content, and thank you for watching. See ya!